I'd like to welcome all present and the viewing and listening public to this, our 35th meeting of the Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure. And I'd like to advise that the meeting is being broadcasted live on Parliament's Channel 11 and also being carried on radio 105.5 FM. I'd like to introduce myself. I am Derup Timal, the chairman of this committee, and I'd like to invite the members of the committee, if you all can please introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. Renuka Sagram Singh Suklal, member.
Good afternoon, everyone. Simon Dinobrega, member.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Ibrahim, member.
Okay, thank you, members. The purpose of our meeting is to commence the committee's inquiry into the occurrence of locust and giant African snail infestations and the various strategies utilized to address the challenges in Trinidad and Tobago. Here today with the officials from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, and the Ministry of Health. Just to remind everybody of the objectives of this inquiry, three major objectives. One is to assess the impact of the Moruga grasshopper locust swarms and giant African snails in Trinidad and Tobago, to identify the challenges faced in treating with the grasshopper local swarms and the giant African snails. And three, to examine the effectiveness of measures being taken to mitigate against the impact of both of these infestations. I'd like to now ask the respective entities for introductions, and following those introductions, kindly request brief opening remarks from the chief officials present, one from, well, of each of the three ministries who are here with us. So, who are we going with first? Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Teresa Roseman. Okay, so with me this afternoon, I have Mr. Hansley Dobal from Region Administration South and our entomologist, Mr. Rishi Mohan Singh.
Okay, Ms. Roseman, could you please state your position with the...
Sorry, Acting Director, Extension Training and Information Services Division, ETIS.
Okay, thank you.
Ministry of Agriculture.
Okay, thank you. And Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair members. Peter Mitchell, Acting Permanent Secretary. I'll have my two colleagues to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Simone Moses. I am a Public Health Officer.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Curtis Sonny. I'm a Principal Medical and Health Officer.
Okay, thank you very much. And then our officials from Ministry of Health.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Hazmat Ali. I'm the Registrar of Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals at the Ministry of Health. And my colleague would also introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Saeed Rahman. I'm the Director of Veterinary Public Health in the Ministry of Health.
Okay, thank you very much for your introduction. And just for brief opening remarks, we'll start with Ms. Roseman of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you, Chair and members. Blessed afternoon, and thank you for extending an invitation to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to participate in the inquiry on the occurrence of Moruga grasshopper, locust, and giant African snails infestation in Trinidad and Tobago. The opportunity to engage in this critical discussion is appreciated as the MALV seeks to address the challenges posed by these pests and the potential implications for agriculture, environment, and overall ecosystem stability. The MALV continues to use a multifaceted approach in monitoring and controlling infestation of these pests through early detection, integrated pest management, aggressive public awareness campaign, and collaboration with local and international stakeholders. The MALV is working on relevant documents to reestablish the gas task force to ensure a coordinated approach and effective utilization of critical limited funding towards mitigation and sustainable management of the pests. MALV continues to advocate that physical collection is the most effective and environmentally sustainable method among various strategies. In closing, the MALV is pleased to be here today to elaborate further and to provide clarification on actions implemented in the management of these pests. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just for the viewing public and the listening public, when you all are hearing the term gas,
Yes,
it's the
giant African snail.
giant African snail, all right? We go to Mr. Peter Mitchell, our Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Rural Development.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the public, good afternoon. The Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government functions as the primary coordinating agency with oversight remit for the 14 municipal corporation and the Trinidad and Tobago Municipal Police Service. It is responsible for guiding municipal corporation and the TTMPS towards the successful implementation of government policy and development objectives. In this role, we also ensure that a cohesive and comprehensive approach is adopted, which takes into consideration the wider policy perspective with great emphasis on adopting a whole-of-government approach. Assistance is given to communities by pooling resources in targeted areas, which include, among others, infrastructure development, disaster management, public safety and security, and public health and sanitation. The Ministry is committed to facilitating, coordinating, and monitoring and ensuring the accountability of municipal corporation and the municipal police service in the effective and efficient delivery of quality services. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Ali?
Thank you, Chair. The Ministry of Health recognizes the potential harm that can be attributed with respect to the Moruga grasshopper and the gas. Like all its policies, the Ministry continues to work together in a collaborative method with other ministries and agencies to ensure that we can manage the situation in the country. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to everyone. At this time, we would commence questioning by members of the committee. And I'd just like to remind both committee members and officials, for better coordination, if you can direct your questions and concerns through the chair. And just to make sure that we mute our microphones until recognized by the chair. And of course, in terms of the mobile phones etiquette, that all phones be turned off or placed on silent, and to minimize, distractions in terms of the phone. So at this point, I would like to open the floor to members of the committee to ask questions. So, as agreed, I think Member Sagram Singh Sukkal will start off.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, colleagues, Chair, and, guests, a pleasant good afternoon. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. And most certainly, thank you for taking the time to appear. As Chairman would have already, applauded you for taking the time to appear before this committee. Of course, all of the entities that are appearing this morning, you would have already submitted for the review of this committee your written submissions. And my intention is really to address objective 1, which is primarily to assess the impact of the Moruga grasshopper locust swarms and the giant African snail in Trinidad and Tobago. So that was the objective 1. And, of course, questions were asked and the relevant entities would have given their submissions. but there are just a few areas surrounding that particular objective that I just would seek some clarification. And Chair, through you, of course, my questions based on that objective will be placed to each of the entities as they appear. So, Chair, again, through you, I would like to address, firstly, some questions to the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. Now, in looking at Objective 1, if I may take you to your submissions dated the 12th of September 2024, and in that submission, the question was asked, which geographical areas in Trinidad and Tobago have been most in need of assistance in relation to the disposal/removal of the Moruga grasshopper, locust, swarms, and the giant African snails? Now, in response to that question, you identified a list of regional corporations, including but not limited to Pinal Debe Corporation, San Juan Laventille, San Fernando, Siparia, and of course you would have also identified the Tunapuna Piaco Regional, that particular corporation. Not because I'm the candidate for St. Augustine, but I'm very much interested in looking at these corporations in particular that you would have identified, and we could use, let's say, the Tunapuna Piaco Regional Corporation as an example. What I would firstly like to ask the Ministry, are there any notable differences in the severity or nature of the infestations across these municipalities? And if there is, what accounts for that in your, technical, with your technical experience, what do you believe accounts for that?
I'll ask Dr. Sunny to give response to that one.
So my present experience would be with Tunapuna. And the experience we've had was that the more agricultural areas, like Waterfield, would have had a higher incidence of the giant African snails, mainly. We also have identified 5 rivers, La Hocata, Bonaire, and Trinity. The grasshopper locust, we haven't seen much of that in our region. In fact, none.
With the severity of it, so yes, in your list you would have identified the areas, the municipalities, right? And we could move away from, I don't want to lock you down into that example. I was just, trying to be funny. But so I'm not going to lock you down at all into that region. You would have given a list of these municipalities. In your assessment, so you would have identified these are the areas that are primarily affected. But the severity is what I'm concerned with. And what do you think, apart from just it being an agricultural area, especially as it relates to the gas? Now, that acronym, as Honorable Chair would have identified, of course, is the giant African snail, and that's for the benefit of the public, right? What do you believe, looking at these various municipalities that accounts? Is it something in the air? Is it something that the residents are not doing? Is it what makes a certain area more prone to the snails in particular, or even the grasshoppers, the locusts, as opposed to another area identified in that list? Have you been able to determine that?
Good day. Just the fact that they're more rural and they have more crops being grown. We haven't identified any facts further than that, but then our ministry doesn't collect information on that. So Ministry of Agriculture might be best placed for that kind of answer.
Okay, and I would I note that, and I would come back to that question when I get to the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yeah, just before you move on to the next
Chair.
thing, I think Dr. Sunny, I think what I remember is driving at, in your experience being out there in the field, right, or your officers being out in the field, when she talks about the severity of the problem, we have had the problem surfacing. We're not sure as a committee what time, but over the period of time, over the years that are passing, are you seeing marked increases in the problem? Are we talking about mild infestation? Are we talking about medium level infestation? Or are we getting to a crisis situation with regards to the...
In my estimation, over the last 2 years, we've noticed more reports and asking for guidance. And but even the quantity of reports wasn't, I would say, severe or getting into the overwhelming at all. So I would say mild in terms of reporting. And we haven't really had a lot of public health requests for dealing with the snails. Now that may be because they've already been channeled effectively to the Ministry of Agriculture. So we haven't really had a very few. Yeah, so it hasn't. Don't press anything. So it has not been a major or even medium problem.
Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Now, so I'm still on the Ministry of Rural Development, right? Can you then identify, or can you then say, how have the ministry been collaborating with local or national agencies? Now, of course, we have two other entities here, but this is at least for the benefit of the public and more so for the record. Can you identify the nature of collaboration that currently exists between the ministry and local or national agencies to combat these infestations?
Chair, let me give a broad thing and either two of my colleagues can answer. At the municipal level, what we ask our municipal corporation to do is to have liaisons with respective agencies responsible. In our case here would be the Ministry of Agriculture. And we sort of categorize each corporation in terms of the extent of that collaboration, whether it's just to pass on the information or whether it's also to do an advisory role to that particular entity, like location, severity, and so forth. Sanwa Laventille has a bit more direct role because they are trying their best to, at their level, to deal with the issue at hand. But overall, what we do at the ministry is that we ensure that our municipal corporation have that collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture. And at my level, if it needs to escalate from a policy or legal point of view, I deal with the PS of Ministry of Agriculture at that level. I don't know if Sanwa Laventille want to reply.
Through the chair, I have to differ slightly from my colleague's response, where we would have had an extensive increase within the last 2 years of the giant African snail infestations. And it's not just, in areas of agriculture, but we're seeing where it have progression, where there are domestic dwellings. That is, we are seeing it, it's evident, and it's region-wide for us. So we have a giant African snail unit, an eradication unit, where we send out teams, and the reports that we are getting, it's really, really a lot.
So there is that collaboration. There's that collaboration, well, from a top-down approach that you all have been taking, and then, of course, interministerial, ministries or agencies are also collaborating in this effort.
Yes.
Now, again, for the benefit of the listening public, if there's any data at all, I mean, because you say you have field officers who would go, and I guess it's not just to identify the areas that are impacted, but what type of impact. I'm not sure if there's any data that you're able, or if not data, just information that you can share. How have these infestations affected, because especially on the ground, for the Ministry of Rural Development, from the Ministry of Rural Development, how have it affected to date the livelihoods of local farmers in the communities that you have actually been on the ground, boots on the ground, investigating this problem?
Right. Through the chair, again, we have been getting extensive complaints. And because of the sheer quantity of complaints, sometimes we are unable to deal with the situation. So by and large, a lot of farmers, we do a lot of education. So they purchase snail bait, they also purchase salt. We recognize that that is somewhat effective, but there are challenges, of course.
Have you, so I know the ministry itself, of course, will drive the policy, right?
Yes.
But, and then based on the information that you all have identified, of course, it appears to me that of course, there would be certain corporations that are more affected than another. Have you noted whether or not let's say the corporations that are affected, have corporations been proactive in taking or been proactive in implementing measures specific to that particular region? Or is it just like a one sock that fit all? What has been your experience so far amongst these corporations in dealing with this problem? And what kind of support does the line ministry provide? So you mentioned the baiting and, of course, the public awareness and all of that. Is there any other area of support that your ministry would provide to especially the corporations that are severely impacted by this problem?
Okay. In terms of our assistance to our corporations, as you rightly said, member, not all corporations have this similar type of experience. And as Samuel Laventil outlined, what we do at the ministry is once the corporations request assistance from us or request some sort of guidance from us, we try to provide it. Of course, Samuel Laventil is ahead in terms of they have a specific unit because of the severity that they have. And what we try to do is advocate for the corporation in terms of our relations with the Ministry of Finance to ensure that there's resources available. Sometimes we are successful, sometimes we are not, because we're not going to discuss the budget here, but it's a competition in terms of getting from the public purse. So that's what we do at the ministry. We are trying to do that. Now, in the context of the local government reform program we're implementing right now, we have seen the need to strengthen not only at head office, but at the corporations, the public health divisions. And at head office, we are trying to reconstitute that public health coordinating mechanism there so that we can also provide technical support to the corporations, because at this time, we don't have at head office that public health technical support as we do with disaster management and regional planning and engineering. So that's one of the things that we are looking at through our organizational restructuring program that we are doing right now. So as I said, we try our best to advocate on behalf of the corporations that they need. If they need help, our involvement in terms of liaising with Ministry of Agriculture or Ministry of Health, we do that. I can give you an example, not in the remit of this committee, but when we had the situation of the dengue fever outbreak, we liaised with the Ministry of Health. We got all the public health inspectors from the corporations together for that specific thing. So if the Ministry of Agriculture comes to us and say it is now a widespread thing, it involves more than one corporation, we will pool those officers together under the auspices of either the Ministry of Rural Development or Agriculture and put that together. So our role is to ensure that we are able to provide resources to the corporations.
Right, and that is what I was really interested in, because at the end of the day, there are 14 municipal corporations throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, based on the information, there are certain corporations that, of course, are more impacted than the other. And I just wanted to be certain that, of course, regardless of if you're in Port of Spain, you're in South, you're in the East, regardless of what regional corporation you're a part of, that of course there is that level of assistance and structures in place that the man on the ground, regardless of where he lives in Trinidad and Tobago, can be provided with that kind of support. And as we look at Tobago, I can't recall in your submissions seeing much on Tobago, but at a local level, does the ministry collect any information or what kind of information you have had on this problem and its persistence in the sister isle?
Regrettably, and that's what I was alluding to earlier, we haven't been collecting that data at head office. Each municipal corporation collects the data respective to their municipalities.
Right.
Like Sanwa Laventil can give you and Tunapuna Piako can give you.
That's right.
But it's something that is on our radar. And as I appeared before this committee in a previous topic concerning with roads, it's a similar thing that we have in terms of strengthening our engineering unit, in terms of the data collection. We have been successful with that in terms of data collection for road, and we want to replicate that into this sectoral area, which is public health and sanitation.
Okay. Chair?
Just if I could cut in, yeah, Mr. Mitchell, listening carefully to what you're saying, and but in terms of the collaboration amongst the municipal corporations, the primary responsibility for that collaboration would lie with the ministry, right? And Ms. Moses did mention about the severity of the problem, because when I listened to Dr. Sunny, apparently it's not a major problem in Tunapuna, Piako, but in Sama Lavantil, it's, there's a severity. So there seems to be, the impact varies from different regions, but they took the initiative to set up a gas unit, right? And in terms of, from what we understand, going through the reports, and then in terms of, public information and persons talking about this, particularly the gas problem and the challenge, it seems as though it's fairly extensive in areas other than Savo Lavantil. And I think something like that is whether, in terms of the sharing of information, commonality in reporting to start with, a formal reporting system, maybe across the corporations, a common understanding in terms of the methodology to treat with the problem, in terms of what is being used and the applications and all of those things. So is your ministry looking at that maybe an overall coordinating unit just for gas?
Not for gas per se, because how we look at gas and the locust issue is under the umbrella of public health. So, and as I alluded to earlier, we are internally, in terms of our organizational restructuring, is looking at strengthening our public health coordination at head office, where we will be able to operate in a faster way in terms of responding to various corporations and their needs. And sometimes we do have corporations pooling to assist their counterparts in other corporations. That goes on right now in other areas, including public health as well. So it is something, yes, we are putting that, we have that on our radar because we know that there are gaps there. And this particular issue is one of those issues that we know that we have to re-strengthen our public health coordination, right? And before I came here, I looked at the proposed structure for the public health divisions. It is still a work in progress, and I am satisfied that once it goes through the various approval process, our line minister and the cabinet, the corporations and the ministry will be able to respond not only to this particular issue, but to other public health and sanitation issues going forward.
No, we appreciate the challenges of restructuring and the fact that the reform is extensive reform, and there are many challenges within. But in terms of what we have here, it seems to be an evolving situation that is getting worse as time goes by. That is growing not linearly from what we understand, but there seems to be possibilities for exponential growth. And, I'm just thinking about the respective time frames and whether or not there could be collaboration, the advantages of collaboration. Of course, we don't need to tell you guys about the advantages, because sharing experiences not only ensures efficient spending, but sharing experiences, increases our chances of dealing with the challenge more efficiently. So, I understand that, it takes time for the reform and putting all these things in place, but I just can't help but think, that if there are some interim mechanisms that the ministry could initiate to make sure collaboration takes place, and that collaboration is not just left up to the individual corporations, but some influence could be brought to bear on the corporations that, look, let's do some collaboration.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I don't want to be misinterpreted. We're waiting for the reform to get right now under existing systems and procedures, we are going to collaborate on certain things. The CEOs are regularly in contact with us at head office, and where a corporation requires assistance, because right now on the ground, I am assisting 2 corporations in South by pulling resources from other corporations in particular issues that they have there. So if and when Samoa Laventil need additional resources to fight the gas issue, we will pull from other corporations as need be. We do have assets at the ministry head office, and we can also have that as on standby in case if that is needed. But I think to solve the problem with the gas, particularly in Samoa Laventil, and it might emerge in other corporations, is that we need not only boots on the ground, but we also need resources on the ground. So that is my role right now, is advocating to my colleagues in the Ministry of Finance for that, because I think that is what Samoa Laventil needs, to help them to get ahead of the situation and for us to prevent the situation from spreading. Because remember, the giant African snails don't know boundaries. They just move. So that they're not going to stay in Samoa Laventil because it's good there, but they can move. So it for me and for the ministry's head office staff, we can't just sit by and wait, because these things can spread. And of course it can happen in South, because we do get reports of certain issues in South that is coming up, and then the experiences of Samoa Laventil can bring to bear to certain corporations in South, and therefore if we need to move around resources. So we're trying to find an innovative way in the context of our existing resource constraints to assist all of the municipal corporations.
Okay, thanks for that response. I think the public, the listener and viewing public, would be a lot more assured based on your response there. Member Sakram Sensuka.
Thank you, Chair. Sticking with Mr. Mitchell, you just stated that certain units were not active or in existence. You recognize now that within the build-out, you need to reintroduce, insect health inspection and probably have a rollout. Is it that we have been void of this for a while, or there was under another ministry? Where would the support have been when it is that you're saying that these other units were dormant within the corporations?
That's a very good question. When I came to the ministry in 2023, one of the things was looking at the head office structures. And going back, I think what has happened over the last 30 years, because that's how far back I have been going, when the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government had different incarnations, and it was merged with some ministries. Sometimes it used to be community development and local government. It was local government and works. Things fall aside. So I think what we have to do now is be definitive and say these are the components of a local government function. And as I keep telling my staff, we have to treat the ministry as a function because ministries change. It's at the gift of the Prime Minister to decide where responsibilities go. So, but the local government function always remains. So my team in the change management unit and our intern and our consultants, what I've told them to do is to look at the function. And that is where, when we looked at the function, we found out that public health and sanitation at head office, there was a big gap. Like, for example, this committee and this things. I realized when we were working with the Ministry of Health on dengue that the chief medical officer was asking me for my point person at head office dealing with public health to come to talk to him. I don't have somebody at health. I have 14 health heads in the municipal corporations. So that is where you realize gaps are. And when we did this, when you were preparing the submission in September, it showed up again. So I can say that public health is something that we looked at. It's not that it was any nefarious thing to abolish a unit. Just as the ministries change over the last 30 years, certain things fall by the wayside.
If I may, with respect to the recognition of the structure now, it has been realized, and whosoever in whatever manifestation in the future, that local government is a massive part of delivery, right? So within that recognition, there is, I'm asking the open question, you see the need to build out properly so that all municipalities can tackle these problems independently and together.
And just a springboard off of that question, because actually that was one of the routes that I wanted to go, a line of questioning as well. You mentioned about reinforcing the importance of the health division at a at a municipal level, right? As a part of your build out for local government reform. For the benefit of the listening, now one thing also was mentioned is the issue of resourcing. And we know with local government reform, one of the benefits, of course, is, the collection of taxes, and now municipalities would now have in their coffers more resources in order to deal with issues at a municipal level, right? That aside, apart from just local government reform allowing you the opportunity to bolster your local health department and its operations, from where you sit, can you just edify the members of the public of other changes that is a consequence of local government reform that can equally assist, or you believe that will also lend some assistance in dealing with this infestation?
Right. Coupled with organization restructuring, what we have done and what we are doing right now as a Herculean task is looking at the assets that the corporation have to deal with particular issues. Now, as you know, the dengue fever situation brought up some things where some corporations went out in front and do certain things. Now, insect vector is not the remit of municipal corporation, it's still the Ministry of Health, but the municipal corporation do have assistance, particularly what we call the original four, San Fernando, Port of Spain, and Rima, Point Fortin, that's the original four. What we have realized is that we need to do, in the context of looking at attacking issues like this, before it reaches epidemic proportions, is that we have to look at mitigation and mitigating strategies. Mitigation strategies comes in many forms. One, people, plant, and processes. So I just alluded to the people in terms of structures. In terms of plant, the assets of the corporation is very important, and that is something that we have recognized. So we have started in the ministry through our change management and in transformation unit in terms of looking at the assets of the corporation. Because one of the things, to allude to what the chairman alluded to, if we are to assist corporations, we need to know what each corporation has and what the assets are. So in case if Tunapuna Piako wants something, we know at head office, Princestown can assist or Arima can assist or even Port of Spain could assist, or something like that. So in attacking this infestation, it's not just only financial resources and people, but I need to ensure that the equipment that these corporations need, they have them. So we are looking at what assets are there, if they need to be repaired, if they need to be replaced, because some corporations, their assets are very old, almost approaching end of life. And if there's no such asset available, we need to ensure that they can purchase through that. So all that advocacy comes through when we're doing our budgetary meetings with them and so forth. So that is one aspect in which I hope, I mean, I'm not a miracle worker, but I can only hope that we can make a difference in that area.
Well, I think it's clear that your line minister has been doing a lot to plant machinery, people, processes. I know it's one of your line minister's mantra especially when he was my Attorney General. But I'm glad for that, because that is really the on the ground benefit that I really wanted at least for the benefit of the public to understand, that even in treating with this problem, how local government reform and more so the implementation of local and all of the changes that the legislation would bring, the impact it can have even in something as, it's not simple, but even in dealing with an infestation or this locust and gas problem, that communities and municipalities throughout Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's a red or yellow corporation, that local government reform, once properly implemented, it can assist. And thank you for placing, into perspective some of the areas in which, once properly implemented, that we can see significant changes that could only redound to our population. Chair, through you, I have some questions now for the Ministry of Health. Yeah, and it's on objective 1. Of course. Okay, thank you. So again, to the Ministry of Health, again, I'm focusing on objective 1, which is to assess again the impact of the locust and of course the giant African snails in Trinidad. So we're looking at the impact. Simply, what public education campaigns, if any, have been conducted to inform citizens about the risks and symptoms of meningitis linked to the African snails and the need to seek medical attention promptly? What the public outreach, because to my mind, I mean, I'm no doctor, I'm no medical expert, but that to my mind is one of the more significant medical issues associated with the gas. What kind of public outreach campaigns have been happening at the Ministry of Health level?
Thank you, Chair. I'll defer to my colleague, Dr. Rahman.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, first of all, in the beginning of the gas problem, and this is one that really has public health implications for us, we had a task force of which we were part of. And through that task force, because most of the communique, most of the public awareness at that point in time was through the Ministry of Agriculture, our job was to provide technical information for the input into all the fact sheets and all the correspondence that went through the Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Health did not at any point in time primarily engage in public awareness. However, within our RHAs, within our health centers, through our need to inform doctors, physicians of the possible impact, we did that internally. Most physicians will know about eosinophilic meningitis. And so just to have them on alert in areas of infestation, to have increase surveillance for symptoms for the disease. I must say, however, the risk we have recognized of this disease, and from looking at research in other countries where gas has been a problem, is extremely low. And as a result of that, our surveillance to date has not detected any cases of eosinophilic meningitis attributable to gas as of this point in time.
So, Chair, through you, so in essence, you have been providing the technical support, lending that support, of course, to MALF in their public awareness campaign.
Yes, that is correct.
And
And also not just technical in terms of zoonotic potential, because one, we're talking about disease transmission, but the other issue, of which my colleague can probably speak a little more about that, Mr. Hasmat, is you have to understand that in the use of mitigation methodology using pesticides and chemicals, there's also a public health risk. And there's a need for those, whether it's local government or MALF, to understand what pesticides are registered, what are the implications for their use, how they are to be used safely. That all provides part of our public awareness. Additionally to that is the things that you may not think about that we also would provide technical input on. What happens to dead snail shells? How does it impact on mosquito habitats? And so through our insect vector control unit, we will also provide information to them so that they could disseminate that because they are the leading agency for mitigation exercises.
And I must commend you all highly because clearly there is this level of collaboration that is existing, and it's collaboration between ministries. For the benefit of myself as a member of government and of course members of the public, what structures are in place that allow, because oftentimes, let's be real, sometimes in the real world people operate in silos, and in my little tenure in government I've realized sometimes to break that silos, to open the lines of communication between different entities, and people become territorial depending on where you sit, you hoard information, you're not forthcoming with information, and often that's why the thing just mash up, for want of a better word. But it seems as if there is this cohesion that exists between the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Agriculture, and of course I'm throwing local government into the mix. That's my opinion based on what is being said here. I stand to be corrected. But what any member of the panel, what allows for this again, for want of a better word, this seamless coordination between these entities that allows the information to get out there as it relates to gas in the treatment of this problem generally, both the locust problem and the gas problem. What systems have been put into place between these three major entities that allows for this cohesion and cooperation? I'm not sure if Ms. Roseman may want to start off.
Through you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Okay, so I'm listening to the contributions being made by both local and health. So when that gas problem first started in 2008, we had within the Ministry of Agriculture a task force. And that task force, as Dr. Ahmad would have indicated, would have included Ministry of Health, it would have included regional cooperation. It had a good bit of ministries. So there was a level of communication within there. So since 2016, the gas, we would have moved from an eradication mode to a management mode. And since that period, we have not had that kind of formal meeting of all the bodies where we have one mind at the table. So that is why in the opening statement, the ministry will say that we are trying to address, or we're addressing now, having the reinstatement of a task force because we need that. Now, I did not know that under the corporation, San Juan Regional, that there is a gas, a gas unit. Because in ministry, we thought that we were working alone, basically, in the work that has to be done. And that's why I keep saying that this is not a ministry problem. It's basically everybody's problem. So Mr. Mohan Singh, entomologist, they would have gone through the entire Trinidad, and we have a map that can tell you where there are snails and areas where there may be higher infestation than others. So if we had this collaboration being cohesive, then everybody will know where snails are, who is doing what, how we could pool our resources together to ensure that the problem that we are having now would not have escalated to where it is right now. Okay, so I don't know if you would like, through you, Mr. Chair, to have Mr. Mohan Singh give you probably a breakdown as to where the snails are.
Yeah, before he goes there, Ms. Rosemond, you mentioned about the task force, the gas task force. But then you use the term that when you move from an eradication mode into a management mode, task force really stopped functioning. Could you just clarify for the benefit of committee members and the public, when you use those terms, eradication mode and management, what that really says?
Okay, so in the earlies, when the snail was basically contained in one locale, which was Diego Martin, our main objective was to eradicate. And I think we were getting very close to that point of eradication. And then I think it was around 2012, somewhere around there, we had a major, major flood in Diego Martin. So in an area that probably had some level of snail infestation, with the flood, the snails move from that area to other areas. And then the snail being a hitchhiker and Diego Martin having class 1 type soil, persons after that flood started going into Diego Martin and taking silt? Yeah, by the truckload. So you know what happened there? So it moved from point A, which was basically almost contained, to different parts of Trinidad. And I said the snail is a hitchhiker. So in areas where you have a population of snails, if you park your vehicle where the snails are, naturally you're going to carry the snail to another location. If there are derelicts within an area where snails are, and persons come and they purchase that derelict, the snails go to that other area. So at that point, I said the task force would have been still in existence. I know the ministry would have gone through, I know we tried our best to ensure that that Diego Martin area where the snails were first established, that there was no movement of material. So I know letters would have been written, but it is what it is, so here we are. So within that period, around 2016, for whatever reason, the task force was just not there again. And the ministry, which is agriculture, they said, okay, we're just going to do the management part of it because it was basically moving around. But now we realize that all bodies, because all bodies are doing something, but it's just that everybody don't know what everybody is doing. So if we need to get information, we definitely will reach out to Mr. Hazmat, and we would have reached out to Pesticide Board when it comes to chemicals and making sure that we advise the farmers and the residents as to the proper chemical that can be used. And we would have reached out to health if we had concern. We had somebody from Ministry of Health, I think that was in 23, somebody would have come on to our committee meeting to give us information. But I don't know if the person retired, but we need to have that collaboration being more formalized now than informal.
And if we are looking to formalize that collaboration, the primary responsibility for bringing about that collaboration, the lead role, would be the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries,
definitely.
right?
Yes.
Okay. But has that been signaled? Is that uppermost? Or
it is uppermost in our agenda, in our committee meeting, and the committee basically consists of MALF, the directors within the division, within different divisions within MALF. Okay, but the collaboration, the work to have this done, the conversation is there. I know the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Hussein, would have alluded to that we want to reinstate a task force to deal with the gas problem because there are too many silos, and we need to get everybody on board. It is not a individual, it is not a ministry problem, but it is everybody's problem.
Any time frame that the ministry has?
Well, I'm hoping
it's just
before,
a conversation.
hopefully before the year is out, I think all the documentation will be dealt with, get approval, and it will happen.
Okay, we are in January.
So I guess within the first quarter, at least ministry should give you, we should have a document to submit to the relevant persons.
Okay, so we go to Mr. Mohan Singh for some data.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So coming out of my colleague, what she would have mentioned, when giant African snail was identified in Trinidad, it was in a core area, which was Dago Martin. And once you understand a pest and its, how it operates, once it is in a core area, you could eradicate it. So that is where the ministry was headed for that period of time, to eradicate it. And like she said, because of the flooding and the movement of material, it moved from that core area to the east-west corridor and then going down to Shoguana's central and even further south. So as of 2023, because we would have supplied data until then, the heavily infested areas, the most infested area, I should say, would be County Caroni, right? From there, then it would have gone, if you have to go like second and third, second would be St. George West. And St. George West will cover from, let's say, Curep Strait to Port of Spain to extent, even Chagaramas and those areas. Then it will be St. George East, and like that it goes. If we had to do it the reverse, the county where you have the least in terms of the population would be St. Patrick West, which is Point 14 going to Cedras. But generally speaking, we have heavy infestation throughout the country, but the Caroni area is the most heavily infested. And a major reason for that is a lot has to do with the tributaries or the water courses that you will have in our country. Wherever it moves, the snail goes with it. It doesn't live in the water, but it will move with the water and establish at different areas.
So one thing, when you use the term heavy infestation, could you give us a bit more?
Right. Yeah, so
between heavy and medium and light?
Sure, yeah. So when we talk about, let's say, a heavy infestation, we'll talk about put in a square area about 1,000 and more snails, right? Medium will be roughly about 500 to almost 1,000, and low infestation will be lower than that. So per square area, because again, it's the nature of the pest that we are dealing with. One snail could produce 400 eggs in a cycle, and it produces 3 cycles per year. So we could say one snail produces 1,200 eggs per year. So very hardly likely you will find one snail in an area. You may see it, but you will have others hiding. So generally that is the gauge we go. Between 100 and 500 would be low, 500 to 1,000 will be medium, and above 1,000 per area, it will be heavy infestation.
Would you be able to provide the committee in writing, the data that you're outlining?
Sure.
Regarding the spread and exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
Elaborate on a bit. It would help the committee in our work.
Sure.
What I would ask, I don't want to leave out the Moruga grasshopper locust as well, but in terms from the perspective of the Ministry of Agriculture, could you provide to us similar information, probably briefly now and then in writing, as to the extent of that problem?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if Hansley.
Thank you, Chair. What we have seen with the Moruga grasshopper, with the locust, is that we got an infestation in 2014. It slowed down, and on 2016-17 there was an upsurge, especially in the Moruga area. I think that was attributed to a number of factors in terms of people doing illegal type activity in the forest, encroachment to the forest. There was also, at that point in time, prior to that, there was also seismic study being done in the area for oil and gas exploration, and also the development of the gas corridor from Guayagüari going all the way down to Point Fortin to supply gas to the thing. So by disturbing the natural habitat of the locust, they obviously came out of their natural habitat and into farming and also urban areas. Through the ministry, we right now, based on our control strategy using chemicals, we have brought down the population a bit, because in certain counties like St. Patrick West, for last year, there was no spraying. We didn't do any spraying at all. We only had one area in St. Patrick East, in the penal area, we had an upsurge, and that was dealt with efficiently. So the thing about it is that we're trying to partner with our farmers and the general public to tell them, what are some of the controls that the ministry is implementing. So for 2024, 25, we haven't seen any upsurge or swarming in areas, urban areas as yet.
Hi. So I'm seeing here, from what we're getting from the discussion, is that we definitely have been gathering information and knowledge, core knowledge of life cycles and ways of spread for these pests. My question is, where are we in a collaborative effort? Are we looking to manage, or are we still looking to eradicate? We heard from the Ministry of Health representative that for the last 5 years, and any submissions, that there has not been a meningitis report from the giant African snail. Have we seen other ill effects health-wise from the GAS? That's the first question I'm going to be asking. Besides and how does it affect our healthcare, manpower and expenditure? That's one. Are we seeing an issue there? We know that the locust and both the GAS have effects on agriculture and output and damages of crops and so on. I'm hearing mixed reviews in between, that we have a control of, or it's not causing much havoc. My question is, seeing that we are now having a full understanding of how these pests spread from a collaborative effort, and I would like to hear from all the groups here individually, what do you think is the way forward with these pests? Is it an eradication, or are we just saying, hey, we have to live with this as part of our flora and fauna?
Who will be going first, Ministry of Agriculture?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mohan Singh, please.
Hi, so thanks, Chair. Now, like I said before, when we talk about eradication management, it means two different things, right? So once, let's deal with giant African snail firstly. Once it escapes the core area, it is very difficult to, hardly likely could you go in that eradication mode. And with this pest in particular, it's an invasive pest, giant African snail. And there is no records of anywhere in the world that you had giant African snail entering a country and establishing, and they were able to eradicate it. And when I say eradicate it, meaning totally get rid of it. One example is Florida, for instance. A number of years they had giant African snail. They had teams in place going in, physically picking up bait and those type of things. And in 2011, they reported that they eradicated giant African snail. And then in 2022, they got an upsurge again of it. So the pest itself, you cannot eradicate it. That's the first thing with giant African snail. The second thing with locusts, Moruga locust, was first found in Trinidad in the 1980s. So it is indigenous to Trinidad, right? Now, they think it is not invasive, but it is indigenous to Trinidad. The locust, compared to the giant African snail, it's a seasonal thing, right? Locusts will start to lay usually about, let's say, October to December or so, and then you get emergence from January to April, compared to giant African snail, where it's active year-round. So either pest, we cannot eradicate it. We could manage it. And that is where the ministry is headed in terms of management. For giant African snail, management in terms of chemical application or natural remedies, things that we recommend as well to bring down the population. And when you keep bringing down the population, in pocket areas, you may be able to get rid of the snail, but you cannot eradicate it. With regards to locusts, because it's seasonal, and we are going to introduce some bioagents, the more hoppers you reduce, the less the population will be for the next year. And it works the same with giant African snail. That is why in the dry season, we continue the campaign for both locusts and giant African snail. Giant African snail more in particular. If you remove giant African snail in the dry season, because you get fewer of them, but if you remove them, that is a less laying and going into the rainy season. So it's more of a management approach.
I'm glad to hear we have a representative here from the South Lavender Regional Corporation, because in working in the constituency, you hear of the units when people have to report about the GAS issue. To me, in my observation, when I've been looking at it from where people have been complaining, it's literally in more moisture-driven and humid areas. So I understand what you're saying with respect to the eradication in a dry season issue, because now coming out of the rainy season, they're everywhere, and it's good to know that it has to become part and parcel of our management. It's also good to know that there's hope that we can actually control the pests. Chair, we need to have a Ministry of Health.
Yeah, in terms of what Member Ibrahim was asking, Ministry of Health.
Okay, so with regards to the management of the giant African snails and the locusts, yes. It's not an opportunity we don't have that opportunity again to eradicate. We have to start looking very, very closely at looking at an integrated pest management strategy for both pests. As was indicated by Mr. Mohan Singh, because the organisms are so prolific, you can't just decide, well, we're going to only use chemicals to control them. It has to be a holistic approach. It has to be an all-season approach, looking at when the pest would be at its peak, looking at when the pest is going to be in hibernation, and looking at strategies to control them at the appropriate time and at the appropriate stage of development. All right? The Ministry of Health, through the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board, have been working very closely with importers to ensure that we have products available locally to help with the management of the snails, but we've also been working together collaboratively with the Ministry of Agriculture and some of the municipal corporations to educate persons on the safe use of pesticides, because as we know, we were trying to manage this pest or these pests, but there's also the human health aspect with respect to persons being poisoned, right? Either by applying the pesticides incorrectly or even being contaminated by the dead snails and dead locusts. If it is that they've been sprayed and died, and of course somebody handles them, you have the opportunity of that person also becoming poisoned, right? Depending on the pesticide that's being used, right? There's also the environmental impact with regards to dead organisms being either burnt, and of course those toxic fumes being emitted into the environment, or of course being thrown into waterways that could also cause contamination of waterways and kill fishes. It's a very, very holistic approach that needs to be put in place to ensure that we protect both the environment and public health from the swarms and the prolific growth of the African snails itself, but also when we control them, what happens at the end when we control these organisms, and of course protecting human health throughout the entire process.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Listening to the information that you are providing to the committee, everyone, and based on what both Mr. Ali and Mr. Mohan Singh have said, are we in a situation we need to move from, how to put it, cruise control into high gear mode? Because, it's no longer a case of eradication and management. And are we at that stage? Because based on what is coming is that this definitely is a serious problem that we face. One, of course, the earlier discussions would have highlighted, you would have highlighted definitely the need for collaboration. But in terms of public buy-in, because we have been going through your responses, and I know everybody is engaged in public awareness, education campaigns, but what are the results of it? Are we really getting the public to buy in, to recognize that with a management approach, that they are a significant part of this dealing with these challenges? How do you all see that aspect of it? If we are kicking into high gear, what has been tried, where the gaps are, and if you all are giving thought to, increasing or re-strategizing with regards to getting public buy-in. Because remember, it's no longer just farmers, from what we understand, it's residents. And in difficult economic circumstances, in terms of farmers, there'll be a lot of, maybe a degree of assistance from the state, right, to the farmers. But when we get into private residences and things, from what we gather here, is that a fair amount of the buy-in means the public have private citizens having to dip into their pockets to buy bait and deal with the issue and all of these things. And some of them may not even be in a situation to do something like that. So, maybe Ms. Roseman, we start with you, and then we can go to Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Ali.
Yes, Mr. Chair. There is some level of public buy-in with respect to the management of the gas, but it is not enough. Yes, that the public farmers, they have to take money out of pocket to buy chemical, but I keep saying the first mode of action to be physically removing the snail. Because you could buy all the poison you want and you could throw it on the ground and you leave the snails alone. That doesn't mean that it's going to deal with the problem. It has to be, as Mr. Hazmat would have said, an integrated approach. So if you are purchasing chemical, you have to know how to use it. Because you're damaging yourself, you're damaging the ground. So you have to be very careful how you're using that. So the first course of action should be the physically removing the snail, manually removing the snail. The ministry would have had an aggressive, and we continue to have an aggressive campaign, education campaign, telling persons how to remove the snail manually. Basically protecting yourself, put it on your gloves. If you don't have gloves, plastic bag. We try not to use too much chemical. We talk about residential. We will tell persons use the salt, use the bleach. This is safer than putting poison different location within your compounds where you know you have children and you have dogs roaming or animals roaming. So we try to avoid the first cause being the chemical. So the first cause should be using your hands manual once you protect yourself. But there is the buy-in. In our campaign, I know there are a bit of misinformation, and that is what we try to correct when we go out. So the officers from both region, North, region, South, extension, ministry personnel, they will tell the public when we have our outreach programs with these individuals, either farmers or residential persons, that the correct way to do things. But I said there is the buy-in, but it should be more. And persons seem to think that it is a ministry problem, and it is not a ministry problem, because the ministry does not have the resources. When you call and say, listen, I am seeing snail in my yard, we will tell you, A, get your shovel, get your rake, get whatever you have to get, protect yourself, and move your snails. If you're having issues, it is too much psychologically, we will talk to you. The officers will actually have a conversation, even come to you and show you how to do it. But the ministry will not come and remove the snail from your premise.
Thank you. We have Ms. Moses here, and she, because of the gas unit within the South Lavender Regional Corporation, I think I'd just like to draw on her actual experience within that unit with regards to the public awareness, some of the strategies that you all have been using to get the public to buy in, recognize that they do have a role in helping to manage this challenge.
So through the chair, first of all, I must say there was collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, because it is representatives from the ministry that would have trained the staff that we have. So you all were part and parcel of the exercise. In 2018, the team was established. After your education drive, we reached out and you all sent representatives to train staff. And that's the springboard from which we started. Now, the challenges I'm seeing of late, there's social media presence. People are saying that these snails are good to eat. That's the very latest trend that I am seeing. It's on TikTok and it's on Instagram, guys cooking these snails, and they're claiming that it's healthy and that's the alternative meat. That's the newest challenge that we're having. In terms of in terms of the increase in the incidence of snails, I'm seeing the infestation. I'm seeing that after flooding and overgrown lots, you know, anywhere there's moisture, and something is very alarming to us that we have seen very recently on the north coast. You know, there's rich, lush vegetation when you're heading on the coast. And while you wait till last quavers, we are seeing massive infestations. And the staff is like, Ms. Moses, how are we going to deal with this? So I think it's not just vegetation and it's not just crops, it's also aesthetics, you know, and I wouldn't venture into the medical part so much because I'm not sure exactly, you know, I wouldn't have all the terms and jargon, but it is alarming in terms of what we are seeing, and I know it will have an impact, a negative impact on the ecosystem very soon, especially on the north coast. I'm not sure if we highlighted it in the response that we sent to the ministry. I'm not sure at all.
No, I don't think we have.
Right, so that is
North Coast is not really
right.
mentioned.
So that is very recent. Within the last couple of weeks, we've noticed an increase in the population there.
Can I, Chair? We might know that they will have some predatory birds that may be able to assist with respect to the locust infestation. Have we thought about the introduction of species within the ecosystem to be able to deal with mobile pests such as locusts? That's number one. And, you know, coming back to the issue of the coast and the reality of it changing our ecosystems, what feeds on the snail? Is there a predator that feeds on the snail? And if that is the case, have we considered in the whole prevention and approach of management the introduction of other species to handle a part of the reduction of these pests.
Through you, Mr. Chair. With respect to, there are natural predators that will feed on locust and snail, but it is not, when you talk about bring new species that feed on these creatures into the country, is that what you're suggesting?
If it is, I mean, I was glad to hear that the locust was identified as far back as the 1980s. I did not realize that it was an indigenous organism and species to Trinidad and Tobago. I would have assumed that it flocked from somewhere else and started to nest here. I'm just talking about naturally. The pests that would actually feed on the organisms or species that may feed on them. If there is a thought of increasing the population of that predator or introduction into certain areas, maybe foreign or local.
Okay, I'll answer to a bit and then I'll give it Rishi right now. Okay, so Mr. Mohansi will answer that question. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Right, so like you said, locust is indigenous. This species, we have two species, I should say, in Trinidad. You have what is called the cedrus locust that came into the country, but that is not considered a pest as compared to the Moruga locust, which is indigenous to Trinidad. And they vary in size, shape, color, and things like that. With regards to birds consuming hoppers, yes. But when you look at the amounts of hoppers that emerge compared to the numbers of birds you have, it's no match, right? And just like what I would have mentioned when we're talking about giant African snail, wherever you have locusts, because of the mass destruction that they do, chemical approach is always the #1 approach. And when we talk about chemical approach, it doesn't only have to be synthetic chemicals. We are talking about the poisons. It could be biological agents, which we have already introduced into the country as of last year, where it is a fungus. You buy it in a packet and you apply that onto the locust, and it actually kills the locust in 3 to 5 days. And even after that, when it dies, the fungus continues to multiply in the environment. So emerging locusts will also get in contact with it and they will die. And we are actually rolling out that this year. As the locusts start to emerge, we started spraying in the areas that my colleague spoke about. So what happens is, the idea behind that is trying to get the egg beds. Because if you get the egg beds, which is more into the forested areas, and you spray the egg beds, as the hoppers emerge, all don't emerge at the same time. So the ones that emerge will get in contact with the fungus, they will die, and the fungus will start to sporulate in that area and kill the egg bed as well. So that is something that we are going to, we continuing with this phase of the locust problem. With regards to giant African snail, there are different parts of the world that, I can't remember the country, but they would have introduced predatory type snails to deal with giant African snail. However, I don't know if the research wasn't done properly or whatever, and that became the pest of the country, right? So that made it even worse. In terms of local, what can consume the snail, you have the birds that will consume the snail, again, but you also have rodents that consume snail. But again, it is not the amounts of snail you have compared to the rodents, it's far different. They cannot control it enough. That is why we have to resort to bringing down populations. Like my colleagues say, if we bring down the population to manageable levels, then you could have those natural enemies coming in and even doing further work. But we are exploring options.
On that point, through you, Chair, on that point, do we have a concern right now that the growing gas issue can lead to a proliferation of rodents? I'm asking a zoological question. Or are we waiting for that to reach to that point to realize you'll have 3 problems because of one?
Because there's a source of food, right. Now, we always had rodents, so they are just feeding off of the snail. In terms of increase, it could happen. I don't know.
Mr. Ali, in terms of the public awareness and all of those things, and the role of the Ministry of Health in collaborating and supplementing what is happening. And then if you could just share some thoughts on that, and then also the insect vector control division falls under the Ministry of Health, right? Particularly in terms of the Moruga grasshopper locust situation. How effective is the role of the insect vector control unit? Are you primarily responsible for the spraying, or in terms of the, as Mr. Mohan Singh had mentioned, the identification of the nest, the eggs, particularly in forested areas? Do you just depend on reports coming from members of the public who are in the forest? Or I think mention was made of the Hunters Association bringing to attention once they come across something. But how, other than that entity, are there any other dedicated efforts to identify, these nests so that the spraying could be a lot more effective?
Okay, so I'll answer the first part with regards to the collaboration. So the Ministry of Health, well, I would say continue to collaborate with the Ministry of Agriculture. And of course, the public awareness is something that we continue to advocate. And from our perspective, with respect to the human health aspect of it, when it comes to things like the pesticides management and the use of pesticides and controlling these organisms, the risk involved, again, is something that we would want to mitigate and ensure that persons are well trained, use the appropriate PPE, etc., when they are applying the pesticides, have a proper system for the disposal of the dead snails, and of course, empty pesticide containers, etc. From the health perspective, as my colleague indicated, the RHAs have been sensitized and they're well aware of the fact to look out for things like, any cases of illness associated with gas, or even pesticide poisoning, and how to treat with those issues if it is that you do have, those issues to contend with. With respect to the second question and the insect vector control division, the Insect Vector Control Division continues to provide a service to control basically our issues with regards to mosquitoes. Collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture is something I think that is ongoing. I know the ministry is primarily responsible for identifying, that's the Ministry of Agriculture, they are responsible for identifying and looking for those egg beds within the forest, not really the Ministry of Health. So again, collaborative work. When our vector control division go out to spray, it also helps with regards to, in those areas, if there are issues with regards to locusts, etc. But our main focus, again, is in the control of mosquitoes and mosquito-borne diseases.
Just to add to what Mr. Hasmat said, the insect vector control division, its primary function is to look at those insects and vectors that are responsible for transmission of human disease. So locusts and hoppers will not fall under that because they are not of that category. So mosquito control and other vectors that may transmit diseases to humans.
Member, the number again, yes?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Chair, I was very happy to hear, I don't know if happy is the correct term, but I was happy to hear that PHO Moses speaking about the most recent bits of misinformation on social media, because I had seen that and I was concerned about it as well, that it would drive people's interaction with the snails. One way to combat that is obviously an ongoing public awareness program. But another way that MALF has targeted eradication was the reward program that bounty pilot project. And in your submission, I did see, I don't know if you would weigh in, one, on its effectiveness. What may have caused it to be either effective or ineffective, and if you think that there is room for another program in this fiscal year geared towards a reward program geared towards the collection of snails and turning them in for your bounty.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for that question. The reward program, to me, was a success in the sense that it was a pilot program. And the pilot program was basically see what the gaps were, if there were any, in us moving forward in putting that as a nationwide project. Coming out of that reward system, which was held in County Caroni, Region North, which is County Caroni and St. George West. That is in Corrup and, County Caroni. Coming out of that, we had public buy-in. It was just for 2 weeks, 3 days a week, which was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. We would have collected, or persons would have brought in, basically, I think over 5,000 plus kgs of snail. So if you look at the snail and how they multiply, we don't need 2 snails to get eggs. The snails are hermaphrodites, meaning that one snail by itself could give you eggs. So we were able to get off the ground in that pilot project 5,000 plus kgs of snail. And if you look at how the snails multiply, as I said, so one snail will give you about 400 per quarter, 1,200 per year. So you can do the maths. So we got 5,000 plus kg off. If you do the maths, you're going to see that we got over 120,000 snails off the ground in that short period of time. So I think it was a success.
What period of time?
That would have been in January 16, February 2nd of 23. And that was the pilot project, just to see how that will pan out, to see what the gaps are. And which is what we keep saying, that the removal of the snail is going to have more impact. So if each person in every household that is affected by the snail, or if each farmer, we don't talk too much about the farmers because they have a system in place where they do the normal maintenance with the harvesting and the field operation. So they have some level of control if they are dedicated to their fields. But when we come to the homeowners, if they move the snail when they see the snail, we would not have a snail problem. So we would not be seeing snails going up to Maracas Beach because everybody is doing their part. But persons see the snails and they think that if they turn their eye or close their eye, the snail will disappear. It will not disappear. It will just keep multiplying every single time. So the project, I believe, was a success. It didn't cost us much money in the sense that we would have probably paid off, I think we paid off $27,000. There were 52 persons who brought snails to the location, which would have been in County Caroni and St. George West. And in that period, we were able to at least keep down some of the snails. Okay, so in moving forward, we would have looked at the gaps in the system. We are still working out the logistics as to how to roll out that particular activity where we physically remove the snail. So this, I believe, could be done nationwide, but will be done in counties. So the same way we did it in the pilot project where you have basically 2 weeks, you might offer the same situation in different counties where persons will probably go to a satellite area that will be identified where you could carry the snails and have it disposed of. Okay, but the thing is to remove the snail. So I hear that we will bathe, we will do whatever we have to do. We do the IPM, which is the IPM being very important. So we are telling homeowners to do not encourage the snail on your premise. So a lot of persons, if they have, either in construction, whatever in the house, they might have areas where things are stored. And the snail love these areas. They will go below the lumber. If you cut grass and you leave the grass in a certain area, they will find their way there because it's comfortable, it is moist. So if you do the general maintenance of your surrounding, even in the farming community, you'll be able to get rid of the snails. But the thing is, we have to be vigilant. We have to take ownership of the problem. And if we are not taking ownership of the problem, then we'll have more rodents, we'll have more snails, because persons are not doing what they are supposed to do. There are people who are doing the correct thing. There are communities where persons come together. So imagine get up one morning and realize you have snail in your area. It takes a champion to go to the other neighbors and say, hey, we have snails, let's deal with it. Snails are nocturnal. They come out at night. So within the community, you have a group of persons, you all come out, and you remove the snail. Less snails to deal with. So just throwing poison and walking away is not going to solve the problem. It will help, but then the snails, when they die or close to death, they will release their eggs. So every time you throw the bait and the snail move away, the eggs are expelled or expelled. Expelled? So the eggs come out. So at the end of the day, you're going to have snails, baby snails coming up. So every time you leave that, more snails. You throw bait, the snail die, eggs come out, you mind your business, but the snail minding their business too, because they'll be increasing every single time. So physically remove. I keep saying that.
If you go to the other side of it now, in terms of the bounty and reward and all of those things, and what you're reporting about the pilot you consider it to be quite successful?
It was, in the sense that we were able to remove a certain amount of snail from that population. It was done in the dry season, which would have been around that December, January, February, which was dry season. But based on the Met Office Met Office saying that it would have been a wet, dry season, we thought it was just fair that we do the pilot within that period.
Okay, now, on the other side, other than the incentives and whatever, monetary, and in terms of I think in one of your responses to the question, response to question 1, Roman 1, you indicated that there's a lack of legislation to hold persons accountable for refusing to deal with the giant African snail on their property. So, on the other side, in terms of legislation, would you want to elaborate on that? And if the ministry is thinking about intended legislation or strengthening the existing regulations and legislation so that citizens would be able to comply.
So through your chair, we'll have Mr. Mohansen answer that question. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Chair, now again we're going back. Giant African snail is an invasive species. Once an invasive species comes into a country, the first thing you do what is called a notifiable status. So giant African snail is still a notifiable pest. What that means is if you have it, you report it. That's basically what it means, right? And
before you go, under what legislation is that notifiable?
It's in our Plant Protection Act.
Plant Protection Act?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Right,
Thanks.
so it's there. And with that comes a fine. If you do not report that you have the snail, you could be fined $5,000, right? That is why going down the road where people are talking about eating the snail and things like that, if you are caught farming the snail and things like that, that legislation could be enforced. However, the history would show that there has been no recorded case of us, meaning a state, actually enforcing those legislation. Now, the Act itself says that if it comes in, so let's say that core area that we keep talking about, what you do is you quarantine the area and you go into that area and you collect and you destroy snails in this case, or let's say it's in a field, you destroy the field and things like that, and there's no compensation for the person. All that is written in the legislation. However, there's no enforcement. There has never been an enforcement of it. So that's where we are at.
Chair, if I may, we know when it comes to the mosquito season, persons can be fined as well or given notification that they haven't cleaned their surroundings and so on. I'm hearing a sense of overlap here. So how hard is the enforcement if it is that we already do it with the mosquitoes and they are classified as a, what is that, a notifier? Yeah.
I think, yeah, just to build on the question asked by member Ibrahim is that, I mean, there are other laws in terms of keeping keeping your properties clean, and there are laws that could be enforced for abandoned properties as well. So it all, some of them overlap, you know, particularly with the Ministry of Rural Development and the corporations. So it's not, other than the question of just reporting, identifying and reporting and saying, well, I've seen the pests on my property. But in terms of the other aspects of legislation, where could there be more enforcement in terms of, you know, getting persons to maintain their properties in a certain way, you know, as we have with the mosquitoes, as mentioned by Ibrahim, and no containers with water and all of these things.
Yes, now I would think so, but you said notifying them. Now, notifying them is one thing.
Yeah.
Whether fining them in money-wise or jail time, whatever, is another thing. So even though, like, because our campaign, we have our field officers always on the ground, whether they visit a farm, whether they visit a resident area, we actually have a hotline that where people could have called. Each county has a line where people call to report snails. We even have an email address where they report the snail. So we will recommend to them what my colleague would have mentioned, sanitation. So in a sense, we notify them. But in terms of that part, going in there and finding them, well, I don't know how much of that.
All right, because the reason the questions are coming up, because in the response from the Ministry of Agriculture, you did specifically say a lack of legislation to hold persons accountable for refusing to deal with the gas situation, refusing to deal with it, not just a question of notification. But that is the response that we have recorded. This is your response to question 1, Roman 1, the third bullet on page 6 of your response.
So through you, Chair, with this question being there, or that statement, that is why I keep saying that we need to get that cohesive type of collaboration with the other ministries. So the same way that health will go out and they will see persons having containers that has mosquitoes in it and dealing with it, agriculture don't have the manpower to do what health do, and we don't want to be duplicating. So the same way as the health goes out, if there's a situation, we know this is a notifiable pest, there is a charge attached. When the health people go out, they see mosquito, they see snail, they either bring it to the attention of the ministry and we take action from there, or we could do some type of legislation where one of the other ministry could have that level of enforcement.
Consideration being given then in terms of reporting, right? And the use of technology, right? Where a lot of reporting, like notifications and those things, could be done online. Are you all considering those things, particularly reporting from the public? Because I'll tell you something, you know, members of the public, when some of them having to take time off from work, to come to report something. These are deterrents, yeah? And then when they get there, you know, if they have to wait long and all of these things. But yeah, any thinking in that direction, that in terms of all of this reporting and everything, that you all are looking to digitize that?
Thanks, through you, Chair. I believe that there's a in the ministry's website. In the ministry website, there's a help desk that is monitored by our communication people. And whenever any questions come through, any reports, it is forwarded to the relevant division or the relevant agency to do an investigation. So there is an avenue for people or residents to communicate with the Ministry of Agriculture through emails and through the help desk. In addition to make a phone call or coming in. So that is there.
Yeah, what I'm getting at is if they're actually, you're looking at, you know, you get on, there's a form, you fill out the form online, so you actually, so that it even precludes somebody going out to do an investigation, you know, but it provides a fair amount of base data for an assessment to be made that would determine whether or not a field visit is going to be productive or not. Things like that.
Okay, through you, Chair. The Ministry Agriculture, I know we are moving to the digitization of whatever information that we have outside that we want to bring in. So I know IT, our IT is working very hard to make sure that that happens. And I hope that they are listening too. So if that part of what you suggest is not there, to ensure that it is plugged in.
Thank you, Chair. Again, through you. Chair, and I'm apologizing in front if this has been addressed, but as you know, I've been between JSCs today. We have spoken about the task force and the collaboration between the ministries and agencies. So we've established that health's role is really from a technical assistance perspective. Agriculture is the lead in the entire operation. Having come from local government, I know as a councillor, the councillors and the PHOs are usually the first line. I suppose, Chair, in further to your own point about how that communication happens from the person who is, whether that person is a farmer or homeowner, how they are being affected. Have we discussed, Chair, and if we have, if I could just get a synopsis of it, the role of the municipal corporations in the entire operation, and what sort of assistance, financial, equipment, product is given from the Ministry of Agriculture, if that is where it comes from, to the municipal corporations, and how that is then disseminated or dispersed to the homeowners, to the farmers, how bait is put, how spraying is done. If I could get a clear understanding of the municipal corporation's responsibility in this, because I can tell you as a former councillor, the average homeowner believed that it was the regional corporation or the city corporation or the borough corporation that was responsible for it, not necessarily Ministry of Agriculture.
Yeah. Mr. Mitchell did at the beginning address one or two things, but I think in the context of all the discussions that have ensued since then, maybe if Mr. Mitchell, you could respond to member.
Sure, I will give the broader thing. Member, yes, in terms of what you have alluded to, that people thought it was the municipal corporations, and I'm glad that people think that municipal corporations have relevance in the scheme of things. What my understanding is, in terms of the briefings I got from the municipal corporation, is that they get the information from their burgesses, their people. Some corporations deal with it, as example from Samoa Laventil. I know San Fernando City Corporation did some efforts there. But in the main, from a operational perspective, they refer this to the Ministry of Agriculture. In other words, the municipal corporations became the eyes of the Ministry of Agriculture in terms of pointing out to them where these infestations takes place and so forth. So that is the extent from across all the corporations what they have done in terms of reporting. Some have gone further, as we have been discussing today. Samoa Laventil has a specific unit, which is an example we would like to roll out to other corporations. So that is, from a broad perspective, where we are right now in terms of the municipal corporation responsibilities. So one of the things that going forward in terms of collaboration, once the Ministry of Agriculture gives that sort of technical advice to the municipal corporations, I think as a first responder, taking a pun from the disaster management framework, as a first responder, the municipal corporations can maybe deal with certain things within their capacity to deal with and not have a heavy burden on the Ministry of Agriculture. Because as my colleague alluded to, they cannot go to and deal with every home and they deal with all of the calls. So if the collaboration from a technical point of view can say to the municipal corporations, you can do certain things based on your capacity at certain things, it can relieve that kind of pressure off of the Ministry of Agriculture in terms of trying to attend to everything. And it's well within the context of local government reform, where what we are trying to do, speaking holistically here, is to have the municipal corporations serve as agents of the central government agencies, in that at the municipal level, some ministries may not have the capacity to be everywhere at the same time, but the municipal corporations are there, so they can act as agents. And this is one of the things, and listening to the discussion, I can see where going forward, the municipal corporations can be a little more than not only the eyes of the Ministry of Agriculture, but can do some of the initial first responding to deal with at that level. I don't know if my colleagues want to go further, Ms. Moses or Dr. Sunny.
Yes, I fully agree. And something came to me as well when the discussion took the direction of enforcement. The municipal corporations can play a vital role because we have litter prevention wardens. And part of their duties is to ensure that persons clean their premises and so on. So they can indeed serve notices, and under the yellow fever regulations, there are streams that we can take to do enforcement, and the enforcement will not just be exclusive to giant African snails, but mosquitoes and every other vector that exists. And, so in that way, the municipal corporations can be involved.
One other follow-up on that. Chair, it's in light of that, especially as we are spoken about transitioning or having transition to the management stage, it really shows the urgency for that task force to be set up, operationalized, but also for the person from local government here as well. I think that there's a space here where the coordinating meeting that the corporation, the corporation will have is so critical, and it may be very, very important for the Ministry of Agriculture if they are not already sending someone to attend coordinating meetings at our various corporations to start doing so.
Thank you. So Michelle, before as you're on the floor, we have two questions from the members of the public for you. They actually identified who to ask the questions to. And the first question, I'll give you the two questions. Has the Ministry of Local Government mandated corporations to increase the cutting of empty abandoned lots to prevent the spread of gas? And the second question, is what kind of response are you getting from the Finance Ministry as you advocate for resources to deal with this problem?
Okay, the first one is easy. From time to time, the ministry embarks on a campaign where we pool resources from the various municipal corporations to clear vacant lots. We did it recently with the cut and clear in response to a request from the Ministry of Health in terms of to assist them in the dengue fever response plan. The second one, Chair, I don't know. We can advocate. I can go into detail, but this requires me to do a budget presentation to you all. But we do advocate to the Ministry of Finance and to the members of the public. Yes, the Ministry of Finance do try their best to accommodate us. Of course, they have their challenges as well because they have to deal with the entire public purse. But in terms for the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, we try our best to work with what we have, and where we need additional resources, the Ministry of Finance will guide us in terms of how we can move monies from one vote to another to meet those shortfalls. But the first question is very important, and I must say what we have done at head office is create that mechanism by where from time to time we do pool our municipal corporations. For example, just quickly, the cut and clear program that we operated around late last year, when we decided to do corporations, we pulled resources from the other corporations into that to deal with that. We spent a week in a corporation, and the other 13 will come and help there. We moved to another corporation, and that went on for about 2 months or so.
Thank you. And we do have a question for the Ministry of Agriculture. Ms. Roseman, the question from the public, a member of the public, is saying that the hotline on the Ministry of Agriculture page and the email address are not functional. And they're expressing the concern that they are not surprised that without these working, the data may be skewed and may feel that it is not serious. This is something from the public. Would you like to address?
So through you, Chair, Mr. Mohansen, will answer that question, please.
Thank you, Chair. So with regard to the email address, it is operational because every month we generate reports out of it. And we actually have someone designated to check that every single day. And every single day, whether you have one giant African snail you saw or 1,000 snails, we already have fact sheets where we disseminate it to them. So that's untrue. That's the first thing. With regards to the hotline, we do not have a hotline at research at present. However, all the 8 counties actually take calls for giant African snail. And at the end of every month, they submit that list to us. So there are hotlines available at all county offices to take giant African snail calls.
Okay, so thank you. We have to look at wrapping up, but before we go to final comments from the respective entities, there are just 2 things that I would like to raise. Mr. Ali raised the question of integrated pest management strategy. And then within the submissions from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, mention was made of a pest management plan. Do you have a current pest management plan that you are using? Or is it something that is in the process of being revised? Or is it something that is not really being utilized?
Future. Yes, the ministry has a plan that we work by. We have a dry season and wet season plan as it relates to the gas.
Okay, would it be possible for you to provide to the committee a copy of that pest management plan?
Yes, please. It will be done.
All right, and in terms of the integrated pest management plan that Mr. Ali mentioned, I think based on, well, all the members of the committee, we have heard, in terms of collaboration And we have heard you clearly that there has to be a resuscitation of some mechanism, whether it's the gas task force or some other mechanism, to ensure that that collaboration takes place. And I think that this integrated pest management plan should definitely be on the agenda for that collaborative effort, taking into account whatever that the respective ministries already have in place. But that integration, that collaboration is vital to give us a good fighting chance with this. And then the other thing is still on the issue of collaboration. In your report, in your submission to the committee, in response to question 5, paragraph 3 on page 10, this is the response from the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. Question 5, paragraph 3 on page 10. Now, what we gather is that there was a draft MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, that was done on the 13th of July, 2020. This was with the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. But the MOU was never finalized because the corporations raised 3 salient issues for consideration that was captured in a letter on October 27, 2020. This, I am just extracting from your response, Mr. Mitchell. And the three salient issues raised were: 1, bearing the full cost of the project, which is understandable; then not having an established vector control unit, that is the Ministry of Rural Development; and then the third was the legal implication that would arise out of directing staff to enter private or overgrown property for the purpose of cleaning and to set bait, right? So I think those were the 3 salient issues raised by the municipal corporations, and that seemed to have been a stumbling block because it didn't go any further after this. So this was October 27, 2020. Do you intend to revisit that MOU, or is that going to be absorbed in the collaborative effort that we are looking at now to resuscitate the task force?
Chair, yes, because I think time has passed, and the strategy now from the government through the Cabinet Committee on Local Government Reform is this: that what we have to do is engage each ministry that have services. And I alluded to earlier when I said having municipal corporations act as agents of central government entities. So I think if Ministry of Agriculture wants to pursue discussion on MOU, we don't have an issue with that. But I think from our policy directive, it's more to, within the context of local government reform, in what functions the municipal corporations can act on behalf of the central government agencies for. And of course, the question of costs and so forth, that is also being worked out within the ministry when I mentioned much earlier in terms of our organizational restructuring, which is being costed out as we speak. So we have had discussion with the various ministries, and we can have that discussion with the Ministry of Agriculture in the context of having municipal corporation work along with them, as I said, to act as their agents and their eyes in terms of how we can be the first responders to this issue, right? The legal implications, my colleague alluded to. Yes, we have litter wardens, which are employed by the ministry head office and are assigned to the corporations, but they operate under the Litter Act, as well as various public health regulations. vis-a-vis yellow fever and that sort of things. We don't have that for gas or locust and that sort of thing. That is why a lot of the corporations, as of now, refer these matters to the Ministry of Agriculture. Right? So we are still open to whatever modality the collaboration will take place, and we can have agriculture be part of that discussion in terms of, in anticipation of full proclamation, what the municipal corporation can discharge on their behalf.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. And on that note, we look to wrap up. What we normally do, we invite brief closing remarks from each one of the entities, and then we close. So maybe we can go with Mr. Ali on behalf of the Ministry of Health.
Thank you, Chair. So again, on behalf of the Ministry of Health, of course, in this scenario, again, stands ready to support in any which way it can, to help in the management of the giant African snail and of our locust issue in Trinidad and Tobago. We continue to collaborate with the Ministry of Agriculture on the different task force and committees that we have, as well as with respect to the training of farmers and members of the public with regards to the handling of pesticides and the safe management of pesticides as well when they use those chemicals to control the various pests, including gas and the locusts. And of course, as well with the Ministry of Rural Development as well, the corporations in particular working very closely with them in terms of providing advice on chemicals and of course with regards to the RHAs and providing support there in the treatment of poisoning cases and issues that may occur with respect to the giant African snail and locust. So with that, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Ms. Rosamond?
Thank you, Chair. So on behalf of the Ministry of Agriculture, I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I honestly think this meeting was a very productive one in the sense that we're actually seeing more roadways where we can make a difference in dealing with the pests that it is the subject of our conversation. I must say thank you very much to Ministry of Health and Cooperation for the collaboration that we continue to get from both entities. And in moving forward, I would really like to suggest that coming out of this, that we could probably have a meeting not too far in the future, even next week would be nice, where we could discuss, at least continue the conversation that we have here, because there's so much work still to be done. And as I say, the problem that we are having with the gas is one that can be resolved if everybody at least come on board. It will make a difference. We should try not to work in silos. I must say congratulations. In fact, kudos to San Juan for coming out of our training that we're able to actually implement a unit where they are doing such tremendous work. And I think that is truly commendable. So we're going in the right direction. So as early as possible, I will inform my PS that PS Mitchell is going to have a conversation with her soon.
Okay, because I was going to suggest that you all could stay on afterwards and have your meeting.
Oh, that's not before.
Mr.
Thank you so
Mitchell?
much.
All right, honorable chair members, it was a pleasure for the ministry and the corporations for being participation. And of course, because of size, we are allotted 3 representatives, but the other corporations did submit as you have in our brief. And for me personally, thank you for allowing me to learn about gas other than the one that makes money. And we are committed to working with our colleagues in the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Health in terms of dealing with this particular issue.
Well, if we extend the bounty system, you will be able to make some money off the gas. Huh? All right, so I really would like to express on behalf of the entire committee and our staff, our appreciation to all our representatives here for your attendance and for the effort you have made to deal diligently with the questions that we have asked. We appreciate that very much. Our appreciation to the viewing and listening audience, to all committee members, and of course to our dedicated parliamentary staff, headed by Mr. Johnson Greenwich. Appreciation to everybody. I would now suspend the meeting, but I'll invite members of the committee just to stay back for a very brief post-hearing meeting. So once again, thanks very much.
What we have to do, I want to encourage members here to agree that going forward to the rest of the life of this parliament, we use the hybrid system